You know, something I could share with you, Lane. I didn't have much to talk about, but I had a couple little tidbits here. And let me see something. Hopefully this will work.
Nice, I see it.
All right. This is Rabbi Eliezer. And in another video, I don't know if you remember off the top of your head, but I was talking in Genesis 6 how God saw that man was very wicked, and it repented him that he had made man on the earth. And I said that the Jewish mind, when they read this, they would see indication that a heavenly conversation had taken place, that God had counseled with his heavenly family on this matter. And I think I even mentioned that this comes out in First Enoch in Genesis 6. And you see this heavenly discussion. But I think in that other video, as a parallel example, kinda, sorta, I showed how when God tempted Abraham to sacrifice Isaac, that the rabbis thought that Satan was involved, or a Satan was involved. Something along those lines. And then I was reading Rabbi Eliezer here, and he's talking about this same incident. And he uses this name, Samael. See that?
Mm-hmm.
And this is one of the names I had mentioned to you in the last video that I put together and put up, or it's that Satan pondering, I guess. There was a belief among some rabbis that there was a ringleader of this group. And Rabbi Eliezer's referring to him here, Samael 8. In footnote 8, it says, the Midrash reads Satan. The name Samael, that is, the devil, occurs in Christian books in the Acts of Andrew and Matthew. Okay, Christian Apocrypha. So this is interchangeable with Satan, the devil, in various midrash. And he says to see the book of Jubilees, chapter 18, 9 and 12. And this, in fact, may have been what I quoted before in the other video. And I stood before him and before the prince of the Mastema. Not sure how you say that. And the Lord said, bid him not to lay his hand on the lad, nor to do anything to him, for I have shown that he fears the Lord. And I called to him from heaven and said unto him, Abraham, Abraham. And he was terrified and said, behold, here am I. And I said unto him, lay not thy hand upon the lad, neither do thou anything to him. For now I have shown that thou fearest the Lord, and hast not withheld thy son, thy firstborn son, from me. And the prince of the Mastema was put to shame. And Abraham lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, a single ram caught by his horns. And in the apocalypse of, or excuse me, in the Acts of Andrew and Matthias, it's very early Christian non-canonical material. Andrew saw the devil. There's that terminology. Here's the name Belial used. And here, the devil, Samael. One manuscript, Samael. That's that name, Samael, that Rabbi Eliezer uses. And this is the name for this ringleader. But I would say his name is Zedek. That's who the ringleader was. If there was one, if this is a correct idea, it was Zedek, because he was allotted that most precious area where Jerusalem is, and where the Axis Mundi was, and where it will be established again. And the significance of Melchizedek comes into this because of where he was. And that's why he can be called a priest of the Most High.
This is the type of thing that will really, I call it a Rosetta Stone or a skeleton key, that if you understand this, you understand it all.
Hey, Velma, Fred, look at this.
I was thinking about talking about Moses and Jethro, and this mountain where Jethro, a priest of the Midianites, used to worship. And this is a sacred mountain, Mount Horeb. It's a sacred mountain of the Midianites. And Jethro the priest would worship there, and his name, Ruel, that was his other name, means a friend of El. And he was a Midianite priest. And there's a sacred mountain there. And Moses used to tend the flocks and walk around this mountain. And it was to this same mountain that God brought the Israelites and Moses in the wilderness, and where Moses received the Ten Commandments, a sacred mountain of the old pagan peoples. But God would reappropriate this sacred mountain to himself. And Lane, in a video a while back, I told you it was a bit of a mystery to me why God would have a sacred mountain outside Eden, a sacred mountain that's not Mount Zion. Why would this mountain be called the mountain of the Lord? It's because it's a sacred mountain that God reappropriated to himself. And this gives insight into his plan for the Axis Mundi to take reign over all the regions of the earth. That idea is coming out there in God taking other sacred mountains to himself. And a real interesting one happens in the New Testament. And this is when Jesus, for the transfiguration, takes Peter, James, and John up onto Mount Hermon. which is a sacred mountain of the ancient pagan peoples. And Jesus says, on this rock, I'll build my church. And I wonder if this reappropriating of a sacred mountain to Yahweh is what's in view. I don't know.
Yeah.
Dr. Heiser hints along that sort of interpretation himself. So it's just something to think about. On this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell will not prevail against it. And that term has a lot of meaning there, because he was in the vicinity of a pagan temple where a deep chasm to the underworld is found, and the pagans would throw people in there to their deaths as sacrifices. And here's the meaning, though: the gates of hell will not prevail against the church. It actually has meaning in that the church will be raised to reign with Christ, because the gates of Sheol, the gates of hell, the gates of the grave is a theme that comes out in Old Testament poetry. And I forget what psalm it is. I think it's David singing about the gates of Sheol that keep the dead down, something like this. I should look that up. But I'll look up the reference and put it on the screen. But the idea is that the grave won't hold down the church. It's a reference to the resurrection of the just. The gates of hell will not prevail against her. And I will give unto you the keys of the kingdom. And this pertains to the ministry of the church, the Spirit-filled church, to usher in the kingdom age.